Charles, we are in the studio again.
We are, thankfully, away from the gunfire.
Well, I was going to say, there's a bunch of people got shot on 38th Street, and then I went to get a haircut today. I was coming back down that way. Tons of cops. I literally took a photograph of a bunch of cops texting and eating donuts. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Evidently, the police presence has been stepped up, Jason.
I think the donuts were the police presence. Somebody gave that to them. But Charles, it's annoying to me that the NYPD is a reactionary force and they're not proactive in attempting to stop crimes. That would be better, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the War of the Dopes. I was going to name this War of the Dopeses to match War of the Roses, but when I am dealing with such educated guests as yourself and tough. Charles Lipson, who will be joining us later, I don't like putting nonsense words in the title.
Right. Well, this is a drama that is playing out now, and it's interesting that, I think about it, why do I have the earphones in? I don't need them.
We can wait until Charles joins us. Yeah,
that's probably better. So it's a drama that's playing out. Of course, you and I cogitate, debate, whatever, what the poster should be, and the art department needs a certain amount of time to get stuff together, and sometimes we're way, way ahead of the pack, sometimes we're off track, but this one I think we are absolutely in the eye of the storm here. What I think is going on behind closed door, we're sold a bunch of, frankly, garbage propaganda by both parties, by the social media types, by the multinational companies, by the mainstream media, but we've been able to see now for a long time that there never were any wheels on this bus. I mean, this thing was just dragged
out. Just a wagon scraping along the ground.
Sparks everywhere, you know. And so initially, Biden was sold to us as the experienced political hack, actually, who, with his 40 plus years of Washington, D.C. insider experience, would be able to bring America back into good conduct around the world with our allies and stand up to our enemies. And then he'd bring in this erudite, historic figure as his vice president, and the two would, make magical music together, sniff each other's hair or whatever they do together. And the reality, that's
the wagon there, Charles.
That's the Cadillac Coupe de Ville.
The wheels are off.
Off that bus. I mean, it gets to a point, and I think I've seen this in business that very powerful people oftentimes get into a place where they can't, they don't know who to trust, and when they make a mistake, they can't admit they've made a mistake because they think if they admit it, then that will make them look even weaker and more vulnerable.
I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think admitting a mistake
is strong.
Exactly.
Right.
It gets you to the solution faster as well.
Right. And so here we have, I don't know if you remember Charlie McCarthy and all that. The
puppet?
The puppet. I mean, that puppet is a legitimate Nobel, was that Victor? What's his name?
Charlie is the puppet. The ventriloquist is Victor something, isn't it?
I don't remember. Maybe. But any one of them, whether it's Jeff Duncan's, Ahmed, or any one of these puppets, is no legitimate Nobel Prize winner in the hard, in the hard sciences compared to this doofus, who, he just, I don't know if you heard this, in the last little while here, he's just up in New Hampshire, apparently, he said something like, I know all about infrastructure, and we need to have good roads because if there's a fire, the house could burn down. In fact, my house burned down in New Hampshire with my wife inside of it.
Jill survived. It's like, wait a minute. There's so much wrong with what you just said.
What are you talking about?
I think Joe Biden is writing for Wikipedia now, Charles, because instead of saying that Charlie McCarthy is a fictional character on a piece of wood, this thinks he's a singer. But it's the puppet is Charlie McCarthy. Charlie McCarthy is Edgar Bergen's partner. It's the dummy.
Yeah, that's what it says.
So why would they call it a singer rather than a fictional character or a puppet?
I don't know. Maybe he sang.
But also, this puppet freaked me out when I was a kid because they made a movie
Oh, Chucky.
Well, it was called, I think, Magic, and the puppet
All right.
looked exactly like this. It was. I never saw the movie, but just the commercial scared the hell out of me.
It is. It is. Little kids should not be around these type of puppets. But anyway, so you have in Biden. I mean, this idea that you can dress failure up and call it success is really damaging to all concerned, to the truly gifted, to the people who tried and failed. It just doesn't do anybody any good to call what we did in Afghanistan now, where today in the cold of November, families, I think there's effectively a children's slave market.
Oh my God! Oh, I saw that. Yeah. They had on CNN a guy buying a 9-year-old girl, and the girl was like, right, obviously resisting.
I mean, can you imagine if Trump got? I mean, maybe Trump could get up. I'll take that back. I don't even think the master salesman Donald Trump could get up and say, "Listen, here in Kabul, I know it's cold, and I know it's possibly a bad thing for an old man to buy a 9-year-old girl, but actually, we had to do it. We just had to do it. You know, it's absurd." And to have Kamala, whatever her name is, stand up there and pretend with Hillary Clinton and the others that this administration is standing up for women's rights. The message this sends between the existence of the slave market, the fact that we are paying terrorists off, the fact that we are, in doing so, negotiating with the horrible bond, the Taliban, or whatever you want to call it, we're negotiating with them in secret, which I fault Trump on as well. I like the Israeli policy, which is we just don't negotiate.
Talk to them at all.
We're not going to do it, because the second you say, "Well, I might,"
then they say, "Oh, this is working."
Every American traveling abroad is vulnerable to terrorists, particularly those Americans who are dumb enough to be in right now Afghanistan. So, I mean, to call Afghanistan a success. And then yesterday, I have to say, I mean, I was listening to, I try not to listen, I was watching the summary, I should say, of what he said in New Hampshire.
Who? Oh,
Biden.
Brandon?
Let's
go, Brandon.
And you know, somebody, the internet has been merciless to him. They have one picture of him. It's like a scene from, I don't know, one of those spy movies where you have an exchange of prisoners on a bridge, and it's Biden walking with like 4 other people across this bridge. This is a man who supposedly won 81 million votes, and all he can produce up there in New Hampshire is a skeletal crew. And he gets up there and he says, "You know, this is fantastic that we got this across the line. It's a bipartisan effort. This bridge was built 80 odd years ago," which of course makes you wonder a little bit about Joe Biden, who was built about 80 years ago. And It's rickety and it's falling down. And in fact, it's been on the must replace list since 2013. Congratulations, we're finally getting this done. And I listened to that and I said, "Oh, wait a minute. In 2013, doofus, you were Vice President of the United States with responsibility for staying on top of rebuilding our infrastructure. Oh. If this was falling down in 2013, why didn't you fix it in 2013 when you could have, when you were still Vice President, when Barack Obama was president?" And you look at this thing, I mean, sometimes bridges like this, you know, maybe it's crucial to fix this bridge, I don't know. But, you know, New Hampshire was a very different state 83 years ago. There was
a lot somebody could build this in a weekend.
Well, there was a lot of industry in New Hampshire 83 years ago, right? 83.
Maybe you don't need this bridge.
Exactly, and I don't know. This could be a bridge to nowhere, a bridge from nowhere to nowhere.
Could be a bridge too far, Charles.
It could well be, or a bridge over the River Cuckoo. Yeah. And so, you look at this, and it's really, you're going to go here first? I mean, I would say that the subway system in New York City is an example of
might need some input.
Well, I mean, I look at
there.
I do not like going on the subway. It is by far and away the most convenient. If you have to go faster than you might walk from one place to another, it's certainly the most convenient. It is definitely in 2021 extremely dangerous. And I don't know the last time you've been up there, but there's in the West 4th Street stop, there are all these placards up that talk about this capital improvement program that is only going to fix, I guess, maybe 10 miles of a portion of one line from 34th Street to 42nd Street. It's a modest project, but the stated capital cost is $500 million.
Wow.
And I look at that thing, and
maybe we don't need the subway anymore.
Well,
it's ideally suited to people who want to slip on feces.
Exactly. Or go get some rat-tat-pooey.
Right.
But it's, you look, there's something terribly off kilter with that. And in this stimulus bill, the vaunted stimulus bill, they brag about the fact that there's an allocation to the subway system which will allow the New York subway system not to raise fares for at least 6 whole months.
Oh.
I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, we should be looking at the subway system and saying, now, wait a minute. There's a lot of Manhattan is very well looked after in the subway system. There are portions of Queens, the Bronx, and Brooklyn that really is a subway desert. It's you cannot get by subway to an important portion. Should that change? Do we need to have the service as intense as it is in New York, in Manhattan? I don't know.
Well, something should be revisited after the pandemic. I think people's commuting habits have absolutely changed. And you're right, reevaluating this whole system. I mean, there was a time, even during my life, where it wasn't unified. It was like the IRT and
BMT,
the whatever.
IND.
That had to be a big deal, getting them all together. Why don't we have some other, instead of these piecemeal, I know why. It's because some idiot has made some deal so that some company that he's getting money from is getting some contract, and they don't actually care about improving the city or using money efficiently or whatever. But as you're pointing out, if they were to look at the whole thing holistically and say, if we made this part of the city walking only and restricted cars to over here and then put the subway there and a moving sidewalk over here, we could improve the flow of traffic at half the cost or something. Somebody could figure that out.
Right, exactly. I think what it's more all about is, it happens at West 4th Street and 6th Avenue is a major maintenance substation or something like that. So there's always a lot of equipment, there are a lot of contractors, a lot of people milling around. And I look at the subway and wonder if it isn't now a project to enrich the contractors.
Exactly. No-show jobs and $80 an hour for milling around.
Right. We need to have like 40 of you stand around, and that's not counting the 160 people we're going to charge on top of that.
Just smoking cigarettes and getting donuts.
And could you take that piece of lumber and move it over there? And then that's a day, I think. We'll come back tomorrow.
Well, you need at least
one
2
nail.
Union regulations.
Right, I know.
We can't work today because there's nobody named Joe here. That's another union regulation.
Right, exactly. And you think back, I don't think this is an apocryphal story. I believe that the Empire State Building was built in 1 year. We could check that.
I think it took a little more, but I think 3 years.
1 to 3, let's say. But the Empire State Building still stands. It was a marvel when it was built.
1 year and 45 days. It might be the Chrysler Building took 3 years. Because there was a bit of a race going on, as I recall, and then they secretly pulled up the spire and the Chrysler Building was super pissed off.
So this is 1930, okay?
No CAD.
No CAD, no CAM, lots of ham. But the Depression, the Depression started in, it accelerated in 31, but the crash was in 1929, October. So
wow. The Chrysler Building also only took 12 months.
Yeah, I would defy the construction people today to build a new Empire State Building in 1 year. I bet you it would take 5.
It would take 1 year of lawyers arguing to do anything with it. 5 would be fast. Well, we have a good example. That Freedom Tower, that took like 7 years just to sue everybody into whatever it is we're going to put there.
Right. So back on the War of the Dopes, we have in Biden. It's preposterous to me that, frankly, his handlers would let him out speaking anymore, because he's got just a few modes. He's got addled and confused. That's one mode that he's most of the time. And then angry. I don't want some angry 70-year-old doofus yelling at me about, what he thinks is in my best interest. I mean, what has this guy ever done that's correct? I mean, Bob Gates, who was in the in the Obama administration as a Republican, wrote a book saying that every major decision Joe Biden's ever made has been wrong. And then this hit job on Kamala Harris is fascinating because, and I don't know how much you've read about it, but I think it was a CNN piece that is based upon supposedly 36 interviews of the Biden team, of the Harris team. Basically, we're in irreconcilable differences here. That the Biden people are this is the piece, very dissatisfied with Kamala's performance, her personnel choices, her management style. For her part, Kamala and her team are dissatisfied with what the responsibilities she's been given. She hasn't been given enough support in her mind. And this is what happens when you take somebody who's actually not achieved much, and I mean both of them, and you then say, all right, guess what? We're now the whole puppet master ring is going to get behind you both and say, you guys are great. And so we'll say that everything Biden does is magnificent. This is the best rushed withdrawal from a position of weakness ever accomplished by a failing power in the last 2 millennia. Give him a give him a sash and a new light blue uniform and aviator glasses, and instead of making him a 5-star, give him a 25-star general. And, the he's a hopeless failure. And she, when people may forget that Peter Schweitzer wrote a book about Biden, Harris, and a bunch of other people. And when you get into what Kamala Harris did as Attorney General and did not do as Attorney General in California, it's really awful stuff. I mean, she persecuted her enemies. She unfairly persecuted rivals. That's, I think, arguing that her husband's law firm is
This is a secret empire.
Yeah, that's it. This is a great book and a must read. To be fair to Peter Schweitzer, I mean, he went after McConnell fairly. He went after Kushner. He went after Kerry, Obama, and bite me. And he also went after Kamala Harris.
Jared.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I don't avoid, looking into whatever somebody is doing simply because they're friends with Donald Trump or a Republican or whatever. That's clear. We've been going hard at the American Conservative Union, and
right,
whoever tries to do us wrong.
Exactly. So what we'll do, we'll talk about this now, and when we bring in Lipson, we'll talk about it. Additionally, there's a guy called Charlie Kirk. I think you know who he is. He has a piece out in Human Events interpreting this. First, it's the CNN and left-leaning Politico and others with this split story, and then Chad Pergram, who used to be a producer and is now on-air talent for Fox. And because he was a producer a long time in D.C., he maintains all these very close ties with the influential people in D.C. He claimed last night on Bret Baier's show and then with Jesse Waters that senior people in D.C. alerted him about 2 weeks ago, that is to say, alerted Pergram to the likelihood that a new vice president would need to be confirmed in the House. And that turns out to be true. You have to be confirmed, I think, by the House. I don't know if also you have to be confirmed by the Senate. But Kirk's speculation is that there are 3 camps, he claims, in the Democratic Party. There's the Clinton thug camp, then there's the Obama Chicago criminal camp, and then there's the California Nancy Pelosi camp. And they're all at war for the future of the Democratic Party.
That sounds right.
It sounds absolutely right to me. But again, all of this analysis misses the very important point that the voices of independents and people who previously, like you, weren't that all that politically active, and for that matter, like me, that camp is, I think, the largest percentage of all. It dwarfs the total Democrat Party, dwarfs the total Republican Party. People...
The F this camp.
Yeah, that look at this and say, you guys don't know fucking shit except how to steal money, borrow money, and steal it, claiming that they're crises. I mean, we got to eventually pay this money back.
They know how to destroy functional systems.
Yeah, they're good at that. But, and the issue here is that what Kirk is highlighting, and this is something I had been talking about a while back prior to the election, there is one avenue we haven't talked about before, and that is, what if Kamala were replaced by Michelle?
Well, I've thought about that.
Yeah, and she would certainly be confirmed, even by a conservative House. She absolutely would be. if they made that
Because there's
decision.
really nothing that falls outside the category of stuff that other people would call conspiracy theories that you could really block her from getting confirmed with.
You just couldn't. I mean, it would be
Racist, and
exactly.
anti-this.
And Kamala would also fall on her sword for this, because Brock would come to her and say, listen,
here's something over here.
you're going to get something over here.
How about a house in Martha's Vineyard?
Well, better than that. I mean, so Michelle,
Court.
this is the first step. Michelle's vice president, and then Joe Biden takes his booster shot, and he's out of there.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know who goes back in underneath Michelle.
Make a farm purchase.
Right, exactly. But I think that's really the direction that we may be headed here, beheading the country. And we often start wandering and shucking and jiving, and we miss the opportunity to praise the art department. But this, again, looking at it close up, generally speaking, I don't get this good reception as good as this on my phone. But this is hilarious. The images, the various images. Biden in that photo is probably saying, "Was it good for you, Kamala?"
They're just sort of, this was a pretty funny film. I was young and hadn't yet been married or divorced when I saw it. I liked it because Michael Douglas urinates on a fish that she's cooking. But this was the perfect movie for the War of the Dopes, and Pete Buttigieg down here in the Danny DeVito role, just waiting in the wings.
And that's another person, an example of a white bread person who may or may not have been a standout student. He was. I looked him up. He went to Harvard College. Both of his parents were professors at Notre Dame. The father edited or wrote some book about a communist Italian philosopher. Yeah, Gramsci, Gramsci.
Oh, right.
SCI. And this guy was raised in Notre Dame, went to Harvard, was a Rhodes Scholar, worked at McKinsey.
Rhodes Scholar, stop there.
Was in the Navy Reserve, in some reserve, went over, this is Snopes, I don't care what they say, but.
Oh, I didn't realize it was Snopes.
Yeah.
Spoke fondly of the Communist Manifesto. He was a Marxist professor who lauded. It's true, according to Snopes.
Oh, right there. Okay.
Even they can't fight it.
Right. And so here's somebody who.
Wow.
And then here's somebody who. We all know what I believe about McKinsey, and this idiot Buttigieg worked in the Chicago office of McKinsey. Who knows how many different projects he screwed up there. Then he was a driver for the top guy at Bagram Air Force Base for like 7 to 9 months. Now, that's service, but that's not, you don't say, well, like George Patton,
I was an Uber driver in Afghanistan.
I was a driver for 7 to 9 months, and I avoided IEDs and other problems, and I got great gas mileage on my Hummer. I mean,
not to take anything away from somebody who has been bold enough and simultaneously unfortunate enough to be thrust into that situation, but wasn't he sort of there when it was like stabilized and not that dangerous?
Exactly.
And
for a short period of time. It's kind of like the John Kerry approach, right?
Insert this guy over here so we can paint him with this glory of being an Afghanistan war hero.
He's a war hero. Then
for getting sandwiches.
Exactly. So, and then he ran for state treasurer in either Illinois or I forget where, and he lost. And then he decided to become mayor of this college town in Indiana. And by most accounts, he was a disaster. Race relations were horrible. The economic prosperity of the town went the wrong way. And his campaign, I mean, he won Iowa, but after that, it was it's like some amateur.
I just realized something. He's a singer, Charles.
No way.
Well, he looks just like that stupid puppet.
Does he really?
Doesn't he look like
Yeah,
Charlie
he does,
McCarthy?
actually. Can you put him up side by side?
Yeah, let's get that puppet back.
In this picture, he looks like he's 16 years old, but
Every picture he looks like he's 16 years old, and I think it's a function of being a dope. All right, so here's the puppet.
I don't see it on this screen. But.
Hang on, give me a second there.
All right.
Charles is ready for his role as a producer.
There you go.
That's
actually pretty good.
Striking
I
resemblance.
see the family resemblance. That's probably the real father, not that Joseph. It's the puppet.
They should bring this puppet back. I guess the guy who operates it is likely dead, but the puppet must be somewhere.
Go Brandon. Go Charlie. Well, and then this guy gets up and he gives a speech, and I must say, I've unfortunately been around transportation experts in the airline industry, railroad industry, trucking industry, et cetera. It is very challenging to think through how the American and then the international transportation systems work, because there's so many actors. It's not simply the companies, it's the regulators, it's the states, it's the feds, it's the international people, whatever. So it's not a simple thing to redesign the transportation industry. But this guy has, what qualifications does he have?
I was going to say, particularly if you have no experience in that field.
Well, it's like Joe Biden. I used to ride on Amtrak every day, so that qualifies me to be president. My son eats. Let's put him on the World Food Program. Put him on the board. I mean,
there's a famous, boy, I can't believe I'm forgetting the guy's name. There's a guy who wrote a book called Story that's all about how to be a screenwriter. And I went to his seminar, and he starts out by saying he meets with tons of people who say, well, I've watched a lot of movies. I'm going to become a writer. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah. You need to know certain things and plan certain things and go through this process.
Now, Charles, is he standing by, or what are we going to do? Reach out to him?
He's got a call because he wanted Zoom, and I sent him the Zoom.
All right, so when he calls, he'll be... All right.
Let me make sure he knows that. Yeah. You can vamp for us while we're
okay. So anyway, this idiot gets up, Buttigieg, and starts talking about a couple of things. First, as if we need a new tax. He has this idea that on top of all the other taxes that you want to pay, that you don't want to pay and have to pay, he now is going to think about a tax that's on the table to charge you an additional tax based on the number of miles you drive per year.
Oh, I know. That's just so objectionable.
Right. And my basic problem with our system of taxation is there's no check on it. If the states can tax, the feds can tax, cities can tax, counties can tax. Now the UN wants to tax you, and
why are they going to tax anything?
Well, because they don't have any money.
So good. Let them go out of business.
I know, but these governments are just have an insatiable need to tax us. So on the one hand, he wants to have perhaps an additional tax. It's not like you get a refund on your other taxes, but yet another tax for however many miles you drive. And then he has the audacity to say that our road and rail and airline systems are racist. And he's going to...
Did he actually say that?
Yes.
How are they racist, then?
Well, in his theory, that what they did is there are arguments that have been asserted about certain kingpins, Robert Moses here in New York, and it's a false argument in his case, that in order to make sure that the beaches weren't crowded with poor people, that the subway system and the rail system and the bus system made it tough for inner city people to get to the beach. I don't know if that's true or false, and I don't think there was a cabal.
Have you been to the beach?
I have been to the beach.
I mean, Coney Island, like?
I don't like Coney Island, but
it doesn't seem like it's difficult for any inner city people to get there.
Right. Yeah, I think it's total hogwash. And
they look at me like, what the hell are you doing here?
Exactly. And I think this young kid standing up there and saying, there's another way of looking at this. I have so much experience. This is a racist system, and where Pete Buttigieg, and my staff are going to decide which highway projects get approved and which bridges get reconfigured. What the fuck do you know about any of this, Pete? And this is not this isn't what people signed up for in 2020, that we're going to have central planned economy run by a moron. A collection of morons, dopes, or whatever.
The moron Politburo, Charles.
That's right.
Well, I do believe Charles will be joining us soon, but he's not on there yet. So we'll just, let it go however it goes.
So he does know that he's supposed to call us?
He asked for Zoom, and I sent him the Zoom information. I've just resent it to him now. So there was a lot of talk that Pete Buttigieg would be the one. I mean, that's why I put him there to take over. He seems a ridiculous choice on a lot of levels. Unpopular, inexperienced. Isn't it true that countries that are really discriminatory against homosexuality, what would that do to the United States to have an openly gay president trying to negotiate with, say, Saudi Arabia or something like that?
On that one, I might part company with you. I mean, I think somebody's
asking
yeah. I
what
mean,
you
somebody's sexuality should be kept in their bedroom.
But that's your opinion. What would Saudi Arabia
Well, again,
say
you
about
can't.
it?
I don't care what Saudi Arabia would say about it, actually, because if we look at all the different countries and we say there's a spectrum of normal behavior, or there's a spectrum that you can say for chopping people's heads off for minor offenses, or chopping their arms off for stealing, versus not even letting people go to prison in this country for walking into Walgreens once a day with 16. On a spectrum, Saudi Arabia has a large number of objectionable practices.
I think you're right.
And so what they think about this, I mean, as a guess, homosexuality is a lot more prevalent inside that country than they want to admit.
Yeah.
And across...
Probably even inside that royal family.
It could well be, and certainly across the Middle East. So I think we just have to decide what's right for our... First thing we should be deciding is what's right for this country. And then if other countries have got a problem with that, let them stay in their country and have a problem with us, and we can decide whether we want to allocate the talent, the resources, and the wealth of this country to doing business with this other country. It's the way I'd be looking at it.
Now, Ireland, I think you mentioned, is like the first major country to have an openly gay president or prime minister, right?
I don't know that it's the first, but the Netherlands, I think, also had one. But in Ireland, I first went to Ireland in 1976, and then I went again starting in 1991. And certainly in the 90s, homosexuality was illegal in Ireland. I mean,
wow.
And there was other. I didn't realize that she was gay. But anyway,
is that the head of the financial? Who is that?
Prime Minister of Iceland.
Doesn't she look exactly like Janet Yellen?
No, Janet Yellen.
Maybe younger Janet Yellen.
I think she looks much nicer than Janet Yellen.
Huh. So I guess there have been a lot of gay leaders. Has there ever been any kind of like dust up with any of these countries trying to meet with some other country that said we don't like you because?
I can't answer that question. But I just to contrast in Ireland. First of all, this Leo Varadkar is
Doesn't sound Irish.
He is, I think, of Indian extraction. I may have that wrong.
Yeah, that looks right.
But he to think in 1999 that Ireland would have mosques popping up everywhere and also a gay leader of the country, that was unthinkable in 1999. So you see how far a country can move. I mean, I gather he's liked in Ireland. I mean, he's done.
I don't mind if somebody is gay or not, as long as they're doing their job. My problem with Pete Buttigieg is that he's an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's one of these guys. He's both arrogant and not that smart. But he has. I mean, he can pull out the pieces of paper that say he's a magna cum laude graduate of Harvard, and he's a Rhodes Scholar, and he worked at McKinsey, and he's a veteran, and he was a mayor, and now he could say he's going to dole out 1.2 trillion or whatever the number is of infrastructure funds. So he's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. So Charles has the stuff here, the link, but for some reason he's not able to get in. So let's try this again.
All right.
We'll just send him this.
Yeah, I myself have had trouble with Zoom. I was able to do it. I just did an interview for somebody else at 2:00 today. And if he's doing it on his phone, it's sometimes you have to look at the bottom of your phone, and there are different things that you have to punch on the bottom of your phone, which I didn't know about.
Well, I think he's familiar with Zoom. He asked for it. But why don't you give people, Charles, just a little bit of background on who our guest is?
Charles Lipson is a distinguished, now emeritus professor at the University of Chicago in political science with a focus on international relations. I first ran into him in, I want to say 2014 or thereabouts. You got him? And when he was on my radio show for the Washington Times, and I had him on a number of different times. I noticed his writing. He writes many places, but He wrote then for the American Thinker and for other things. Like he got his PhD from Harvard in 1976.
Maybe when did Jerry Corsi graduate?
Around the same
Yeah,
time.
maybe they know each other. He's with us now. Hello, Charles. How are you?
How are you, Charles?
I'm great. This is my friend and colleague Jason Goodman as well. We were just singing your praises and giving your background.
Do nothing.
Thank you for joining
Let me
us.
do nothing to stop you.
We're delighted you're on, and I thought of you in particular because of that excellent piece you did last week concerning Durham and your views on where you think the Durham probes are going. There is obviously a big debate. There are people who think they know everything, and this is going to be a know-nothing affair, and nobody's going to go down. There are others who think it's kind of serious. Be curious what you think.
I think it's kind of serious, and I think that Durham himself must think so, or he wouldn't have released those large charging documents. To charge somebody with a false statement, you only need to make a very brief intervention and legal statement. The fact that he made very long ones, I think, says he is looking at a wider conspiracy. I think the only question really is how high up he's willing to go, and I think that Comey and McCabe are in particular in a vulnerable position at the FBI. It's hard to believe that Hillary Clinton, who seems to have approved the whole operation and was behind it all, will have left any fingerprints on it. But my own sense is that they're proceeding in the way that you would normally proceed. Namely, you start at the bottom. You present material on people that you have dead to rights, and therefore have really powerful incentives to flip on the people above them if they have any information. And it's not just the three who've been indicted, one of whom is pleading not guilty. So, two of them are pleading not guilty, I think. One has already been convicted and sentenced, but one looks like he wants to resist, Sussman. But he will have a lot of information upon the cutouts that Hillary used. That is, when she instigated this operation, they moved through two avenues. One was to generate these false documents about things that Trump did to collude with Russia to be elected fraudulently to the presidency, and the other was to spread that information, to get it out to the public, ideally before the election to prevent Trump's election, and then after the election, other Democrats ran with it to try to stymie Trump in office. A key to that was getting the FBI to investigate. And what we know about that is that the FBI had plenty of information very early that all the Steele dossier materials were bogus. Mm-hmm. They couldn't be verified, and yet they kept getting warrants based largely on that material. And I think they're in deep trouble for that, because Danchenko has told them that he was interviewed and gave them plenty of information. The FBI then interviewed Danchenko's own subsources. They said that the material in the Steele dossier was not truthful. It was bar talk, and none of it was intended to be a real representation of things that had happened. And the FBI continued to run with it. Some people have to be culpable in that. If they're not found culpable, it will be another nail in the coffin of Americans' distrust of a unified system of justice that holds powerful people to the same standards as the rest of us.
I think that's absolutely right. And I'm sure you noticed, and if you didn't, I'll just remind you, the statements by Larry Doyle one of the two financial bounty hunters that John Durham's team had in fact met with Doyle and reviewed the voluminous evidence of massive fraud at the Clinton Foundation, which is, I think, tied in here. Durham does have the purview of going back and seeing how the reported stymieing of the Clinton-founded investigations, which were opened January 2016, may also fit into this narrative. So that on the one hand, they wanted to...
Well, you know more about that than almost anyone, Charles, because you've investigated the Clinton Foundation at length. I don't know nearly as much as you do, but there's a lot of evidence, or at least discussion, that the reason that Hillary Clinton ginned up this Steele dossier and all the rest was to distract from her own email troubles. And in fact, the reports are that that's what John Brennan, then head of the CIA, briefed President Obama on in the summer of 2016.
Yeah, I think that also is true. And there the big question, of course, it's interesting, since the last time you and I talked, we've done a lot of work, Jason and I and others, on whether the Clinton Foundation even exists. Was it ever lawfully organized? And our view is it wasn't. So nonetheless, it has operated since October 23rd, 1997. And when you bring it forward to November, December 2008, after Hillary had lost, but was going to be Secretary of State, query, why did nobody go and say, all right, it's not the emails that we want from January 9th, 2009. We want emails going all the way back involving the Clintons, and they're milking these international aid schemes and sourcing political contributions via the foundation. That all needs to be looked at. Why didn't Barack Obama and his vetting team say, we can't allow Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton to host a CGI on December 1st, 2008 in Hong Kong during the transition? We can't do that. But they did that.
Well, I don't know how much the Obama administration actually was able to rein in the Clintons and how much they tried. I just don't know. But if what you say is true about the Durham investigation, that they're actually going to go after the Clinton Foundation itself, that would be a very big deal. It always looked like pay to play because, and one of the pieces of evidence is that all the donations dried up once she no longer had the prospect, was either in power or had the prospect of going into power. Right. Yeah. And the Clintons as a political team are dead. And one way you can tell that is that their very close, longtime ally, Terry McAuliffe, didn't have the Clintons in to campaign for him. Bill would have Me Too problems in this day and age, and Hillary's just unpopular. And so he had everybody he could bring into Virginia to campaign for the governorship, but he didn't include the Clintons. So they're politically dead. And because they're politically dead, they don't have much leverage over anything beyond their small, immediate crew of allies, right? I've been struck over the years by how Clinton allies have been so loyal to the Clintons. But the one question now would be whether people who have real knowledge and who might themselves be legally vulnerable would say anything. If there is an investigation of the Clinton Foundation, boy, I really haven't heard much about it, and it would be a shocking blow, I think, if that were true.
Well, we can hope, because the not-for-profit sector, which you've been involved in more or less your whole life in academia and elsewhere probably, is a vital sector in this country. It's a sector that distinguishes us positively when it's well done. But when grifters get inside these entities and divert money, and especially do that operating internationally, it really is an awful thing to do. When monopolists do it, like Gates and others, and get cover for their, quote, philanthropic good works, that's really bad and a blight. And at this moment, I would love to see a bipartisan effort to go after right-leaning, left-leaning, center-leaning people who have been abusing the charity world to get money back to close the deficit and lower our debt.
Well, I don't want to conflate different aspects of the world of charity, and I know that you don't either. Take something like the Gates Foundation. They've taken money that was privately earned and legally earned, basically by delivering value to people, both from Microsoft and from Warren Buffett. Those people made their vast profits legally, and you may or may not like what they're doing in terms of their charity work, and you may or may not like the fact that by having such a vast foundation, they have a lot of consequent influence. But that's fundamentally different, in my opinion, from an organization that raises its money by essentially grifting. That is, the U.S. government's budget is so large that the politicians we once saw, when they retired, they would go back to Kansas or Iowa or Mississippi. They all now stay in Washington, right? When Evan Bayh ran for governor of Indiana, the question that ultimately sank him was a reporter who asked him, could he name his address in Indiana? And he couldn't, because he mostly lived in Washington. He had a little small apartment that he rented to maintain a legal address, and he couldn't remember the address. The Clinton Foundation was not funded by people, by the Clintons themselves. It was funded by people who wanted to be close to the Clintons because the Clintons themselves had political power and were expected to have more of it. That, it seems to me, is a very different issue, even if all of the work they did was great work. I'm not saying it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. Even if all the work they did was great. I mean, this happened in Chicago, right? In order to pave a road, you had to give money to a charity that was favored by a former mayor's wife when the mayor was in power. It was just known. You had to give money. That's grifting.
Right. What I would make a further distinction with, in the case of the Gates Foundation, to pick on them for a second, what they do, or what the Gates family did before Buffett came along, they donated vastly appreciated stock that they had bought for nothing,
right,
that was suddenly worth billions. And they made a donation of the stock into the Gates Foundation, took a massive federal tax deduction against their incomes, but still controlled the stock. That, in my view, is wrong. Through the fact,
well, let me push back a little bit. I understand that, and I don't have a fixed view on it, Charles.
Sure.
But if you clamp down on that, you're inevitably squeezing not just Bill Gates, but you're going to be squeezing a lot of donations to the Red Cross and colleges and universities and all sorts of. And who is the beneficiary? The federal government, which will raise more tax revenues. And in that trade-off between the private sector getting squeezed and the public sector getting squeezed, I would rather see the public sector be the loser, even if it means billionaires get a tax break. So it's not a simple question.
Oh, I know.
I can understand both sides of it.
Well, but in addition to that point that you make, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
The further problem I have is I've looked through the Gates Foundation donations,
Yeah.
and I put them on notice in writing that they
Yeah.
had made massive, and I don't mean like one bad donation, hundreds of donations mischaracterized to the Clinton Foundation as being a public charity when it wasn't. I gave them a chance to do the right thing, which is under the law, when you're notified that you've done that, you're obligated to get that money back from the Clinton Foundation, and they did not do that. So, and I know it's not just
that's a distinct issue
Yeah.
from donating appreciated stock.
Right.
That Gates himself or the Gates Foundation may have wanted to have influence with the Clintons. Why should they be different from anybody else who's a major player on the left?
Well, I'm saying in that instance, I don't have a problem with rich people, poor people donating appreciated stock if they donate it to an entity they don't control. But if you donate it to a charity that you actually still control, you've just taken stock from one pocket, put it in another pocket, and you're getting a large amount of money back from the federal government. That shouldn't be something that you can do.
You're above my pay scale, my friend. You're above my pay scale, and I will defer to you. All I would say is that in a trade-off between the government getting more tax revenues and the private sector getting more donations, in that simple trade-off, I'm in favor of the private sector. We don't have a government that's too small. We have a civil society that's under too much pressure.
I agree. Now, you're there in Chicago. Can you tell us what's going on with the Obama Foundation there in Chicago? Or are the locals happy with that? Or is that a mess? Is it a triumph?
It's not a triumph. Let me explain what's going on. It's literally happening within a few blocks of me. Of course, I knew President Obama and his family for a long time. I didn't know them well. I wasn't close to them. But Barack, when he was just that, would be supervising his daughters playing in our local playground and all the rest. And he was at the university in a kind of adjunct capacity teaching. So some people saw him there. I didn't. But it's sometimes referred to as a library, and it's important to understand it's not a library at all.
Right.
There are no documents in it. That's true for any of the recent presidential libraries. If there are documents, those are all controlled by the federal government and are not really what the museums are about. The museums are about two other things. They are these temples of glory to the former pharaoh, right? They're like pyramids in that sense. And I mean, that's the overarching theme. And to do that, what they do is they put physical documents there. They attract people to come through and so forth. And then they also set up speakers programs, fellowships, other kinds of things in which they can bring in all, not only the president's friends, but over time the people who defended his programs or will defend his programs. I mean, the Reagan Library is never going to have in people who think that it was all voodoo economics or anything like that, right? I mean, that's just never going to happen. You're never going to have people coming to the JFK library, 70 years after his death, talking about his marital infidelities and all the rest. That's just not going to ever happen. But they also have all these people who are associated with it, whose job is to keep the flame alive.
Right.
That's one issue. The second issue, and that's always going to be a problem. And my initial problem with the Obama Library, which I wanted in Chicago, was not any of those things, but rather my concern that the University of Chicago would have some formal connections to this institution, which was itself a political institution, first and foremost. I got very little support for that because everybody at the university loved his policies, loved the president, and they were proud that somebody associated with the university was elected president. And of course, the whole country was proud about overcoming a certain element of our racial heritage and so forth. I understand all that. The other issue now is where the library is being built. Call it a library, but I mean, it's a presidential center. And it's being built in a beautiful park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park, among other things.
Sure.
It's being built on the lakefront where there's essentially no good rapid transit. It could have easily been built a few blocks away, half a mile away, where there was a lot of rapid transit and where it was adjacent to a neighborhood that really needed economic development, and that you would have thought a person who both favored public transportation and got his start as a community organizer would have wanted it. But no, he wanted it in the high prestige location. There was a lot of litigation at long last by, quote, Friends of the Parks. That's the formal name of the organization, but they failed to get it through. But it's worth noting how long it's been since that since the president left office, and the construction is only now beginning. There are other disputes. There's a golf course being built that will be a high-end golf course. It's replacing basically a neighborhood golf course. There's a question of who gets to hire the people who will build this building. You can imagine the fight over the revenues and all of that. But the fundamental issues have now all been decided, and they've been decided in favor of what Barack Obama wanted.
Now, you recall perhaps, and this is a small joke, and I'll get back to a serious issue, but you recall that at one point when Barack Obama, as president, was in trouble with the gun lobby, he or his handlers actually said that one of his favorite sports was skeet shooting. I don't know if that did happen. And so I'm wondering where the skeet shooting range is going to be at this presidential center.
I had an uncle who was a world champion skeet shooter. And personally, I love skeet if they're properly prepared and served.
Yes, pick out the shotgun shells.
Yeah. So
actually, I'll tell you something. As somebody who was raised in a rural area, when I first started going to fine restaurants in cities like Chicago, and they would serve things like duck and venison, I couldn't imagine how they could find the hunters who could provide them with the duck and venison on such a regular basis. Yeah. And when I ate, especially duck, I ate it very gingerly because the duck I ate would have buckshot in it. And if you crunch down on it at any point, you could break your tooth. So these are all things that I knew from my youth.
Yeah. Well, so tying it perhaps together, the flow together a little bit, these presidential libraries are supposed to house presidential records. And the question is, what are presidential records? That's settled by the Presidential Records Act of 1978. And you mentioned the missing emails of Hillary Clinton. Those email communications, many of them could actually be technically presidential records, particularly if they were emails back and forth to Barack Obama. And
Well, that's one reason, that's one reason a lot of this didn't go forward.
right.
Right. Because Hillary would say, if I'm prosecuted on the illegal use of any of this, I'm going to call the President of the United States, former president, or, I'm going to call Barack Obama. He was mailing me using a non-governmental address that I had. So he and his aides had to know that this existed.
And Barack Obama, also had multiple, perhaps personal email accounts as well that he was using.
But the issue for her was not only the email accounts, but the server itself.
Sure.
So, yeah, I would just say there's no need for any presidential library anymore in terms of records. All the records are electronic.
I agree.
All of the records can be kept in a central location and just accessed by anybody who wants them. But that's not a reason why there shouldn't be presidential centers around the former president. Actually, I have one other objection to them. Although, as I say, they're private, and, as far as I'm concerned, people can donate. My concern is actually that presidents and their friends start raising money for them while they're in office.
I agree.
And anybody can donate to them, but the records of the donations can be secret. And moreover, the Chinese government can donate, the Saudi government can donate, the Russian government can donate, or their citizens can, in ways that would be illegal for a campaign. But I just find that this is rife with problems for conflict of interest.
I couldn't agree more, Charles. Now, you've been very generous with your time, as always. Tell us what you're working on and what your activities as Professor Emeritus entail.
I'm doing two kinds of things. One is I'm writing a lot of op-eds. In fact, today I was writing about the problem of immigration on the southern border. So I've gotten back, and what I try to do in those editorials is, obviously, I'm here in Chicago, and I don't want to try to do things that people who are sitting in Washington, D.C. and have access to what's going on in Congress or inside the White House. I just rely on that reporting if I think it's decent reporting. I want to try to synthesize things, and I want to try to draw on my background as a social scientist to say things that are that might help illuminate the larger structure, because I do think that our constitutional democracy is facing real strains right now, and I want to explain what I think those strains are and how I think we can deal with them. The second thing I'm doing is I'm doing some academic writing, most of it in my general area of international politics. I may do some additional writing. I've written a number of books for students and so forth to help them with their education. I may go back and do some of that. I have a number of those projects. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy writing, and I enjoy editing, and I enjoy meetings like this, Charles. I'm happy to do these.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. Fellow Charles, I should say, is there social media contact information you'd like to share, or?
There is, and there are two. One is charleslipson.com.
Okay.
It's free. I have all of my articles posted there. And the other is charleslipson@gmail if you would like to sign up for any of my articles. I send them out. I send out a kind of synopsis of each article. There might be one a week, two a week.
Are you using our art department?
I like playing. Sometimes, almost always, the pictures next to the articles are what or what Real Clear Politics or Newsweek or Spectator World or whoever has put there, but sometimes I will do my own. So I don't blog. I write these kinds of articles, and I do some of these interviews. And I loved today's interview. I did an interview the other day that was one of the rare ones that I didn't like. It had a sort of a flack from the other side who just repeated talking points.
Right.
And then when you objected to them, he just repeated them louder.
Right.
And I don't see our country being helped by discussions like that.
I agree. And that Jason is the founder of Crowdsource the Truth, and he does a lot of shows like this. I just do 2 a week. And what we decided on this show, we wanted to give people like you a chance to not be interrupted by commercials for Geritol and whatever else is on Fox News, and instead dive a little bit more deeply, have a normal conversation with people who know what they're talking about.
Well, thanks, Charles. I meant to tell you that your car warranty may be about to expire.
Are you not going to give us a pillow code, are you?
Yeah.
I would like to ask one question before you go, Charles.
Please do.
Michelle Obama, our theme today, of course, is this growing feud between the Harris vice presidency and the Joe Biden presidency, the possibility that she might get 86th and somebody may come in as vice president. People have speculated that could be Pete Buttigieg. People have even speculated it could be Michelle Obama. She was the dean of students at the University of Chicago for many years, wasn't she?
No, she was. She worked at the hospital, and the head of the board of the hospital was Valerie Jarrett.
Oh, how'd she get that job?
Oh, gee, I don't know. But let me just say that when Barack was elected to the Senate, Michelle's salary went up quite substantially.
Yeah.
But in any event, Valerie Jarrett's family is one of the most prominent families in Chicago. Valerie's father was a very prominent doctor at the hospital,
right,
and a professor. But on both sides of her family, they're very prominent. And in fact, one of her links to the Obamas was that she was able to, in effect, open many, many doors
right,
to them, to a certain parts of the influential community, especially the African American community. I think it's important to go back and realize what Obama achieved politically and how extraordinary it was. He had a partly white family, partly black family. He was raised in Hawaii. He came into a city of Chicago, which is built around these kind of political clans, which are very tight, an Irish one, an African American one, and so forth. Look, keep that picture there for a second, will you?
Sure. I'm so glad you're excited by that picture. I wanted to ask you specifically about this.
I'm going to tell you something about that picture.
Yeah.
And he rose to the very top. And I think it's an extraordinary achievement that's not been recognized as fully as it should be. That he was an outsider who came into a very tight city and really rose to the top in an extraordinary way. Now let's go to that picture for a second.
Yeah.
Do you have a second?
Yeah, of course.
That picture, as I understand it, is a diagram from Saul Alinsky's work.
Mm-hmm.
And when it appeared in the University of Chicago Alumni magazine, they deleted what was on the blackboard.
Wow.
And then some people wrote in and objected, but of course, as in all these cases, the objections were hardly heard, right? I mean, they appeared, but they were hardly heard.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember Alinsky was a local figure in Chicago.
Right.
Right. And he was very influential on the left. Barack Obama also had very close contacts with Bill Ayers, um, and of course his congregation, Barack Obama's congregation, was the Reverend Rice. All of that, all of those were obstacles that could have sunk Obama had there not been a meltdown of the stock market in 2008, and McCain was clearly unable um, to show that he was the master of that. And Obama, for whatever reason, appeared to be much more in control. Um, I'm really struck by how deep the problems are now in both parties.
I agree.
In
We were
both parties.
We were saying before you came on that I got out of college in 1978, business school in 1980. In that time, and I wasn't like you, a political science professor, but I studied political science and economics. And back then, I would say the overwhelming percentage of the electorate were either Republican or Democrat. There were some independents.
Right.
Now, I view myself as an independent. I don't know if you do, Jason, but I think the big question, thinking ahead to the elections of 22 and 4 and afterwards, is what percentage of the population is going to identify as actually independent from both parties, really wanting to see a reduction in corruption, a reduction in the bloated deep state, and progress, value for money for the vast sums of tax revenues that we're sending into the coffers.
And a lot of those independents are not eager to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They have buyer's regret over Biden, and they might have voted for Trump in retrospect over him. But what helped Youngkin win in Virginia was not, he was able to hold on to the Trump voters, but he gained a lot of voters that Trump was unable to persuade, at least in 2020.
Right.
And so that's the looming problem for the Republicans. The looming problem for the Democrats is that the party's about to blow up.
Right. Well, Charles, as I say, you've been very generous with your time. Do you have another question, Jason?
Yeah, just real quick. I wanted to ask if you know what it actually says here, because I just briefly looked up Saul Alinsky, Relationships Built on Self-Interest, and he's talking about community organizing, which is obviously,
Right.
Marxist. I see in these boxes it says corp, banks,
Utilities.
and then it looks to me like it says DEGOP, which would be, the two-party system thing, but it's unclear exactly what he's writing.
Yeah, I
is there a
don't
video?
know. But what I will say about community organizing in this sense is that all that community organizing was to organize to ask the government to do things for your community, right? It was not the creation of a self-sustaining civil society in that community. The metaphor for all of this, for me, is Hull House, Jane Addams' great Hull House, which taught people all kinds of things about how to, new immigrants from the West Side, they were Polish and Jewish and Italian and Greek and so forth. Over time, Hull House became a pass-through for state of Illinois welfare funds. And when welfare funds got reduced, Hull House went out of business. Right? And that's a metaphor for a lot of what counts as community organizing these days. It's not that that people are wrong to demand a fair share of government resources for their community. That's perfectly acceptable and fine, reasonable thing to do. But if that's all you do, you're not building a sustainable civil society in those communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would also say that about Alinsky, it was all negative. It was all about the other guys are bad, they're wrong. And if you think about it, that is itself not a very sustainable or if it is sustained, it's very bad for the country. And I would say that that's what all of our recent elections, except maybe the two Obama elections, have been since the turn of the century, maybe. They've all been throw the bums out. They've all been negative elections. And again, this is not a very good thing. So I don't know what was on the board. I am no master of the Alinsky doctrines, but they have proved very effective for the left, and I gather that many people on the right are also using them.
Well, maybe, and I'm sure you don't need any ideas for books, but maybe what you should think about is whether you or a credentialed political science type should write the 180-degree approach book to rules for radicals. I don't know if you call it rules for conservatives, rules for patriots, rules for the opposite of radical, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, and it leads to my final question, if we have just a moment. We spoke about the relationship between Barack Obama and Bill Ayers. Chesa Boudin is now the district attorney of San Francisco. His father...
Doing a great job.
That's right.
Well, right. And his father was just released from prison. Bill Ayers put out a tweet praising that. I mean, what do you think about the Weather Underground and its influence on the modern incarnation of Antifa?
Well, I think that there's a pretty direct link. But I think that the big story really is that the first duty of government is to provide a modicum of social stability and order, public order. And when district attorneys won't prosecute, when police won't get out of their cars to go after people because they know that the people won't be prosecuted, we've got a basic problem. One of the things that I'm writing about with regard to immigration is that I think voters are beginning to connect the lawlessness on the southern border with lawlessness in our cities, because they both have the same kind of political support and they both have the same kind of political opposition. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask the police not to go around beating people up. Like you don't have to read Easy Rollins novels about police, Los Angeles police in the 1940s beating the crap out of people to get false confessions and all the rest. We want decent policing, but at the same time, you can't have people walking into stores grabbing $1,000 worth of merchandise in the middle of the day, walking out, putting it in their car, and driving away. Under those circumstances, Walgreens will close, as 5 of them just did in San Francisco, and people will begin to seek recall elections for people like Chesa Boudin.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I hope you stay safe there in Chicago and wherever your travels take you. We'd love to have you back on in time. Thanks for your time.
I'd be delighted. This was a lot of fun. Charles and Jason. Jason, I appreciate your having a different name.
Thank you. Yeah.
He's thinking of changing it.
I set that up on purpose.
I went to a dinner party once where all 3 women were named Susan and 2 of the 3 men were named Charles, and it was quite an adventure.
Wow.
Well, it's better than usually you meet new people and you're sitting there halfway through dinner like, holy crap, I can't remember their names.
Well, that's right. Or the Monty Python routine where every philosopher in Australia was named Bruce. Good to talk to you guys.
Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you so
Charles.
much, Charles. Great to have you on the show.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there we go. Excellent interview there.
Yeah. And just...
Yeah, people are always perplexed for the moment here while we're trying to end the call. Well, there you go, Charles.
Yeah, he's a fine man, a distinguished career, deep thinker.
A little too positive on Obama for my personal taste, but, you know, that's what makes horse races, right?
Well, he does live in Chicago. I mean,
you're right.
Yeah. And I think, actually, now I wanted to ask him about this. Who set up the University of Chicago? I could take these off now. Was it...
Pritzker, wasn't it?
No. I think it was a family that you know and love. It was instrumental.
Rockefellers?
Yep.
Yeah. No, and then Pritzker is somehow doing something.
Oh,
there.
the Pritzkers are one of the big billionaire
Medical
families.
school there or something.
Well, no, the governor of Illinois is
I'm
a
also
Pritzker.
pretty sure Valerie Jarrett's father, although he's a distinguished doctor, he was involved with something, maybe eugenics.
No. What it was is Valerie Jarrett was born in Shiraz, Iran,
Right.
because her father, Dr. whatever Bowman, Bowman, was working in a hospital that was funded by the Nemazi family of Iran, which, when you look them up, is a very controversial family, Nemazee. And of course, with a name like that, there are variant spellings of that family, but there are allegations going back centuries that
Well, this is the third person today who looks like a singer. He should be a wood puppet.
Oh my God. Is he still alive, James?
No, he died at 88 is what an article I just had up before said in 2011.
Wow.
88, Charles.
88, there you go. Yeah, he was professor of pathology and genetics at the Pritzker School of Medicine, yeah. But the University of Chicago, if we could figure out who set that up. Was it? So I'm curious how instrumental the Rockefellers may have been. Yeah,
well,
there you go.
Dewey. Did he beat Truman?
Well, the
That's
founders,
the same-
John D. Rockefeller. There you go.
Yeah, and then also Dewey.
Not a good person.
Isn't he the guy who ran for president?
I don't know if that's the same one, but there was a Dewey. Yeah, this is a philosopher. Some are very negative on Dewey, that he was basically a social engineer.
I'm
This
sure.
is the Dewey Decimal System, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's something to do with looking up library books.
Yeah, so categorizing all books.
I didn't
But
really.
but with some would argue with a slant that is decidedly left-leaning.
The book categorization?
John Dewey's work. But John D. Rockefeller was centrally involved in funding the University of Chicago. So here we have another, the Rockefellers are everywhere because they were so wealthy so long ago and have managed to hang on to their wealth forever, one way or another. Eugenics.
Yeah, and it brings up Oregon. So there's something. Well, here you go. He wrote a book called The Road. I knew I remembered he was involved in eugenics. He wrote a book called The Road to Eugenics.
Is that a good thing, Jason, eugenics?
Well, if you think there are superior races and the Untermensches should be extinguished, I suppose it's good, but...
Not if you're an Untermensch.
Yeah, look, he wrote The Road to Eugenics. So, Here, it's available. We can read it.
Yeah, I'll put that on my to-do list.
Well, wait a minute. It takes us right back to that.
Well, I think this is at the first page.
Oh, download, it says. Here we go. We could read this.
People are not born equal.
Oh.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Nor do they live or die equal. Religion, race, class, nationality, and many other categories have been the source of stigmatization. People could read this, but, eugenics espouses the reproduction of the fit over the unfit, right?
This is
Hitler stuff.
Yeah.
Like, who decides who is fit and unfit? So he's a scumbag, Bowman. His daughter is a scumbag.
You like her, right?
I'm not crazy about Roseanne Barr, but I thought what she said was funny.
I forgot what she said.
Can't say it.
That's why I forgot.
Canceled. It had to do with Dr. Zayas.
What?
Exactly. Dr. Zayas. See the third image in that triptych?
On the left or the right?
That is called Idlewild, Borneo, Ape City. And Dr. Zayas is in the final destination.
Now I'm remembering now. Okay, got it. So, nice break there to talk to Charles Lipson. He is a very well-read and thoughtful person. I don't think we've really dwelt enough on the present state of craziness that we have in Washington, D.C., where since the last time we were on air, different flashpoints around the world have gotten rougher and rougher. We've had, Jason, I don't know if you've followed this, but on the border between Poland and Belarus,
Yeah.
There's a huge problem. The Russians are arguing there, and with regard to the Russian-Ukraine border, that it is we in the West who are amping up tensions.
No doubt.
And whereas in the West, our official organs of power in the State Department and elsewhere are saying that prepare for war in Europe over the twin issue of an unchecked stream of refugees ultimately coming from the failed states and the toppled states that the Obama administration and later now the Biden administration toppled through the Arab Spring process and now through the abrupt running away from our responsibilities in Afghanistan. That stream of refugees is coming into Europe, and the people who are there have been sold a bill of goods about this sustainable green energy that depends on wind in a period now where we have these geniuses who can plan 10 years ahead and 1,000 years ahead. Never thought that we could have a winter where it's really cold and there's no wind. So it's cold.
That's the official organ.
Okay, there you go. It's cold and there's no wind, and on top of which there is soon to be no natural gas flowing possibly from Russia and from other Russian-influenced states into Europe, just as we face an intense cold snap. It's already started there. There's one in Vancouver, which has nothing to do with the Russians, I hope. And here in our own
Yeah,
neck of
there's
the woods.
supposed to be next week something, right?
So this team, and it's interesting, somebody was, I didn't read the whole article, but apparently the New York Times has a piece for the first time laying the blame for high energy prices and inflation on the moves of the Biden administration. So this is not, standard operating procedure to say that any problem we have now in November
It's still Trump's fault.
it's all Trump's fault. I mean, it's everything. The problems, Trump. Benefits, Biden.
Is this it?
Is that recent? I don't see the date. No.
November 1st.
No. It's like in the last 24 hours.
Well,
yeah, this is but just what you want. You paid up for a nice seafront estate, and you really want to look out the window and have these howling windmills, everywhere, making noise, creating bird sushi. Everywhere you look, instead of nice waves, you get to see these windmills that probably don't work that well.
oh, here we go. Is this it?
It could be
Asks
that.
the FTC to investigate.
It's either that.
That's crazy. That's like you turn on your oven and leave the house and it burns down, and then you ask the fire department to investigate. I don't know.
I do a sweeping investigation of everybody but me. Take as much time as you need.
He's just an idiot.
He really is. Anyway.
Well, Charles, it was quite an interesting show, but there's still more time for us to discuss whatever you might like.
Well, I could go quickly. I'd like to do one thing quickly, and that is to say that I've been doing a lot of reading of my own notes and reading of books to try to understand what might have motivated Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden to work so assiduously to protect Hillary Clinton. Why would they want to do all this? And what I've been discovering is...
The food in jail is terrible.
Exactly.
It's one reason.
Getting gang raped is not the best thing to have happen. But a common tactic that we see in the way the Clintons and now the Bidens approach the politicization of the Department of Justice and of the FBI is the following, which is something I was not actually as aware of as I now am. So the way I think this works is you have the IRS can go and use its processes. They can audit you. They can decide there's a problem. When they get their evidence together, which they either get themselves or in concert with the FBI, comes a moment where they have to go to the Department of Justice and say, we need your assistance. You have to decide whether the resources should be allocated to prosecute Charles Ortel for charity fraud or whatever it might be. So there's this tension. And there's also, because there, I think, was and is a real concern about whether unscrupulous crooks would get elected again, or should I say stay elected and control these levers of power, there are guidelines that you're supposed to follow that are written for how you handle these types of cases. So when you're working in Little Rock on a matter where you suspect the entire state is corrupt and you're concerned about this president you've just elected who has all these scandals, and then the president turns around and as his first move fires all the sitting U.S. attorneys.
Yeah.
Then he fires the head of the FBI.
Red flag.
It's kind of a little bit, and then
Why wasn't more of a big deal made about that back in 1991 or whenever it was?
it was 1993, and because I mean there were so many scandals at the beginning of that administration,
couldn't keep up.
Exactly.
That's a good strategy. Just keep the scandals coming so people...
Yeah, exactly. So, but I noticed the common approach they took then to what they're doing now, and what they did under Hillary Clinton's tenure and Barack Obama's tenure, is they get the Department of Justice people who should be investigating something, compromise them, get them to recuse themselves. So with regard to Bill Clinton's initial 93 and forward period, eventually the U.S. attorney who was seated in Little Rock in the Eastern District was somebody called Paula Casey. And on crucial cases, I'm seeing a lot of different accounts from inside and outside or whatever, that she recuses herself, and the ultimate decisions on how to prosecute, how to handle the investigations, how much resource to put behind the investigations, and then how the special counsel should conduct itself, that was all micromanaged from Washington, D.C. by loyalists to Bill Clinton. So it was really just, all right, obviously there's a problem. We had a financial meltdown. Madison Guarantee went bust. Other things went bust. Clearly, these commodity trades are suspicious. The fact that the Clintons had no money, but suddenly, spending all this money and raised all that stuff is very suspicious. And then on top of that, Bill has this pants problem, and he's, going after all these different people. And that turns out to be something that is quite prevalent, not just in Arkansas, but in Washington, maybe here in New York and other places.
We blew it, Charles.
What did we do?
Well, we should have contacted William Sessions. He died last year.
Huh. Well, we can still try to reach him.
It might be harder now.
But I don't know, did he write a book?
Well, that's a good question. He was the first FBI director to ever get fired, and he was the guy who was fired the day before they discovered
the day before
Vince Foster's body.
Yeah. So the train I was going down there, Jason, for a second, is just to say that the investigations that we know of, there's a book about him.
Out of print.
Wait a minute.
Actually, no, there is no book. This is just...
Justice Department report.
Yeah. Why is that at Amazon and not available? That's weird, huh? Here's Good Reads by Jesse Russell.
When was this book written?
This is his high-quality content by Wikipedia articles. What is this? And his middle name is Steele? I didn't know that.
Yeah. But, Jason,
Sorry.
The issue here is that they allow the investigations to happen, the ones they want. They know they've got them cooked and nobody's ever going to do anything about it. There'll be no consequences. Let them run, the Clintons and the Obamas. And then what they don't want you to do in the case of the Clintons, and frankly the Republicans, is to understand what was really going on between January 20th, 1993 and January 20th, 2001 with regard to allowing China to have most favored nation status and joining the WTO and outsourcing to China, outsourcing to India. They don't want you looking into who benefited from all that, who raped the former Soviet Union, who raped Central Europe.
I think it was all the same people.
Exactly. They really don't want you to look over there. So they'll let you get distracted, bread and circus style. They'll let you get distracted with Monica Lewinsky and the travel office and the commodity trades and you name it, so that you don't focus on the sellout, the fact that these politicians in both parties have sold all Americans out and future generations out. And today, at this moment, we are waiting, hoping that this clown show that's running the Pentagon and our administration can actually be nudged off their couches to counter these aggressive moves, both by China and also by Russia, that are pinching on choke points that could really damage, I mean, if not put this country underneath. And so,
Is Joe Biden on the couch, Charles?
yeah,
I don't know if this is his house.
time for another ice cream.
He's like, where'd Comey leave the Lego set?
Kind of looks like Comey, same decorator maybe.
Build me a Millennium Falcon. There's no way he has the hand-eye coordination.
Oh, no way. No. He doesn't have the hand-eye coordination to sit down unaided as a guest.
Oh, my goodness, Charles. We're just in such a terrible state here with the...
So the back in 93 to 2001, the Clintons skated. And after that, the Clintons skated under Bush because the Clintons had put in their people to make sure that, no real investigation would come forward. And then I believe once we get to the real bottom of what happened starting in June of 2008, I think that Hillary Clinton and the Clintons basically told Barack Obama how high to jump. I think that, there's no way with the scandals that Obama had in his background, for example, the real estate scandal of how, as somebody without much in the way of income and no assets to begin with, how did he end up with that mansion in a fancy portion of Illinois with more land than it should have? Who actually paid for all that? It's just one of the many scandals. And the 2007-8 campaign was vicious. I mean, it wasn't like two good old friends saying, we've known each other forever. Bill Clinton tells Ted Kennedy, 10 years ago, that boy would be getting us coffee. And that didn't go over so well when he was trying to get Ted Kennedy's endorsement for Hillary. And the what's his name, the Blumenthal, that thing, the magazine cover. I just don't understand why the income, you see, for example, with Jill Biden and the rumors that they want Kamala out. Kamala, during the campaign, was rough on Joe in that first debate, but that's nothing like what Clintons did to Barack Obama in the 2007-8 campaign. So why would Barack Obama be motivated as his first prominent pick other than the VP? Why would he be motivated to announce that Hillary Clinton was going to be Secretary of State just as Bill Clinton was in Hong Kong conducting a Clinton Global Initiative?
Are you aware of this reveal, Charles?
Yeah, I don't think so. May 21, 2021. That to me is such a staged picture. I don't know. You've been around women when they do the kissy, laugh stuff. This is an incredibly uncomfortable picture. This is not a warm
You don't
embrace.
even need it to be staged. Look, her arms are straight down. She's being held in a bizarre way, looking away, strange look on her face. This is not two people who are staring into each other's eyes, contemplating their deep feelings for each other. This is, let go of me, you bitch.
Or this is, Kamala saying, let's snap your ass like a twig. So the decision to put Hillary Clinton in, I mean, imagine if Donald Trump had said, my Secretary of State is going to be, of all the people I might choose. Yes,
the reveal is Jill Biden's book. Jill Biden is the one. It says, bygones appeared to be bygones at the White House on Friday with First Lady Jill Biden getting chummy with Vice President Kamala Harris. Days after a forthcoming book revealed Biden said Harris should go F herself for attacking her husband.
But this is an old story. This is May of 2020.
But when a proper school marm kind of old lady like Joe Biden tells somebody to go fuck themselves, they really mean it.
Yeah, that I agree with. Yeah. Well, I honestly think that any loyal spouse, let's say you get married again and your wife, or I got married and my wife wanted to run for office, and I said, please don't do that. And she said, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. So, and you see some person with compared to Joe Biden, who I don't think he's really all that qualified, but he has spent more than 4 decades in the Senate, these committees,
on paper, he's qualified.
But I'm saying he's played the game. He has the Rolodex. He knows, the right people to hire to, get his pants changed before they smell too much and get him to the restaurants or whatever. But Kamala Harris had been in the Senate for like a year or 2 years and had gotten nothing significant done. I mean, I don't. Maybe longer than 2 years, but she doesn't have a distinguished record.
She's got a very Barack Obama kind of.
I take that back. A term and a year, I think, or something like that.
But even so, she kind of comes out of nowhere. She's connected, obviously, to Willie Brown, who I was playing with this photograph but didn't show it while we had Professor Lipson on. But so on the left is Willie Brown, of course, and then
who's that on the right?
That's Kamala.
Am I missing something? Does she look very light compared to others?
She's younger. Who knows how the photograph is printed?
But now she looks darker than that, doesn't she?
Maybe she's tanner. I mean, again, it could be a flash photo. It could be that perhaps Willie Brown is very dark-skinned, and so to balance the darkness of the image, it could be printed really.
But get a load of that jewelry. That's not cheap stuff.
But look at this. This is Saul Alinsky and Willie Brown.
Right.
And then the other thing that I find very interesting is Willie Brown got a low-key warning on 9/11, according to the SF Gate. And this article came out on September 12th, 2001. So that would be a time where, certain types of reporting would happen before people would say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. But Willie Brown himself said that he got a call from what he described as his airport security a full 8 hours before yesterday's string of terrorist attacks, advising him that Americans should be cautious about their air travel.
He was booked to fly on 9/11 from San Francisco. Didn't one of the planes? I think.
Yeah. Well, this is why I'm telling you this, Charles. I mean, again, anybody, and I'm not saying that you do this, but anybody who says, oh, Jason Goodman is a conspiracy theorist who traffics in misinformation is either ignorant or complicit with some of the things that I talk about, because I wouldn't tell you something if I didn't have good evidence to believe that it was true. So there's a serious problem with regard to Willie Brown having connections to, communists like Saul Alinsky, and then passing the torch on to communist idiots like Kamala Harris.
Right. Well, I have to say, I don't know if you've ever read Rules for Radicals, but I decided that I would run the risk of having the stench of that.
You said he's a chump.
It's the ravings. It's like Greta Thunberg's uncle. I mean, it's the ravings of somebody who can write. I mean, he understands English, so he could write. But it's all about being a pain in the ass,
right?
To get what you want. It's like a spoiled child saying, obviously, what I need to do. I mean, the 7.5 billion other people on the planet don't know at all how to run this place. So I, an 18-year-old, am going to look like that until I'm going to hold my nose.
Blood vessels in her eye.
Yeah, I'm going to hold my nose and fart until you do something about farting. I mean, it's just this is somebody who really needs. And Alinsky is dead, of course, but the people who think that you can get ahead, like Hawk Newsom and others, by threatening to do something you won't like unless they get what they want, this is not community organizing. This is banditry, being a brigand.
Yes.
This is not behavior that should be lionized. And I don't understand. Hillary Clinton wrote her senior thesis about Saul Alinsky.
Right.
And it was sorry.
She dedicated the book to Lucifer.
I know, and she worshipped him. I mean, she was like, and coming from her background, which I think is a bit odd, she was a Goldwater Republican. So to go from that to worshiping Lucifer, I mean, Alinsky.
I think she was probably a plant in the Goldwater campaign to screw it up.
Oh no! What you read, she was.
So how did she change?
Well, because I think what happens is when you grow up in a family that has political views, and you want to go along to get along. She started out as kind of like the model student. She wanted to go away to Wellesley, and she was I think probably following the instincts of maybe of her father. And then she was converted, maybe in high school or by Wellesley time, certainly, into the cool kids are all
hippies.
Right, so I'm going to be a hippie. Look at this team.
He's like, I just came out of the tree where I was defecating on students. You want to buy some blow?
That's right. God almighty.
I know. I mean, it's like if, they're coming out with this Spider-Man movie where they're messing with the space-time continuum and multiple universes are colliding. The universe where a car skids up on the sidewalk and crashes into the two of them, that would be a good universe in 1960 or whatever this is. It's really upsetting, but I mean, again, there's the definite through line, and there's a lot of screwy business going on in Chicago. I'm glad that we were able to look at that photo of Obama, and it gave us some leads that he's talking about Alinsky. The one last thing I'll say about this photo of Willie Brown and Camel A. Harris, everybody is very fixated on the fact that he's 60 and she's 30. I actually don't care about that at all.
Well, he's married.
That's the bigger deal.
Right.
And also the fact that, you know, he's hooked up with communists and people who seem to have foreknowledge of 9/11. So, I mean, he quite clearly seems to be down with the 60s radicals. And you may also recall this article about Bill Ayers in the New York Times on September 11th, 2001. And he's in here talking about how he's got no regrets for a love of explosives. And I mean, you know,
this came out
on September 11th, 2001.
published. Okay, so that meant it had to be submitted on the 10th.
Prior.
Right.
Right. And this, you know, when they're printing the New York Times, it's got to be like 4 a.m. So, I mean, the planes didn't hit until 8:46. And here we are. Bill Ayers says, I don't regret setting bombs, Bill Ayers said. I feel we didn't do enough. This article to me suggests that Bill Ayers had foreknowledge of what was going to happen that day. At least Bill Ayers, if not more people. And the connection to Bill Ayers, Barack Obama, Willie Brown, Saul Alinsky, Kamala Harris,
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. This is all a crew.
Yeah. Well, the decent people include many of our loyal viewers, and thank you to them. But we have to, I think, do more than just listen and exchange views. We've got to start convincing people that the 2022 election is very important. It's not, we don't want Republicans. We want conservative economic types who are, I think, socially open-minded and responsible to put the kind of pressure that's required here on government spending to stop the corruption and stop the bribery, stop the foreign misadventures.
This is controversial speech, Charles.
I know. Probably canceled.
A lot of people want corruption.
That's right. Different channel. Yeah.
Well, it's been an excellent show today, and it is nice to have a change of pace, being indoors and having the guests and everything. It is going to get colder, so we'll probably be doing some more of this, and the holidays are coming up, so be all kinds of things happening. But I want to thank all the viewer sponsors who make the show possible. People can go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and support the show. I also like to remind people, Charles, that they can watch us on Rumble. And, you know, there's a lot of people who say, hey, why don't you get off of YouTube and just use Rumble? There's still a lot of people who watch on YouTube. And as long as we have a channel there, I'm not going to get rid of it. People can go to rumble.com/user/CSTheTruth. Looks like we've got 16 people watching us there right now. And there's a good library of content building up on Rumble. We've also got Odyssey is another great resource. Not a lot of people have subscribed to Odyssey, but I'll tell you the truth. This is starting to become one of the largest repositories for Crowdsource the Truth content because it was backing up the Jason Goodman channel for a period of time. So if people are looking for older videos or videos that have been kicked off of YouTube, Odyssey is a good place to check out. Also free, also has simulcasts of the live streams. So there's all kinds of wonderful ways that people can stay in touch with the show and support Crowdsource the Truth through the holidays. If people want to use cryptocurrency to support the Counter Lawfare Fund, you're going to get twice the subscriptions for the same price. So buy a subscription with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and you're in business. Give out gift subscriptions and all that sort of stuff. People can email me about that. But Charles will be back on Sunday. Oh, and I'll be back later tonight. I haven't spoken to Lee today, but there is supposed to be a high dive tonight. I think we'll be on high dive tonight. I'll see everybody later for that.